Hey guys, I know that many of you are currently hyped about Last Epoch and Diablo 4 has lost some of its spotlight here, but for all of those who are excited to compete in the upcoming Gauntlet Leaderboards, I might have the best rogue build for you today. And yes, I know that many creators are convinced providing the best builds out there, but I will try to prove to you why I believe that my build might have the highest potential here. So in the background you can already see me speedrunning a tier 70 plus Nightmare Vault, and I'm also tracking my time here in the top left corner so you can get an idea and compare it maybe to your own build. Please notice here that I'm not just rushing through the dungeon without killing any monsters, but instead I'm trying to clear as much stuff as I can while pushing towards the end room. I think that this is as close as we can get it to mimic the upcoming Gauntlet dungeons. Talking about the build, I think that many of you should already be familiar with the Penshot Rogue, or how I like to call it, the Barber Rogue. If not, you can check out my other videos where I cover various variants of this build, which might be more useful for leveling or the early end game. The Penshot Barber Rogue is by far the strongest build in Season 3, and in this video I will focus on the updates I've made in the last weeks. Now let's talk about why I believe that this build will be number one in the leaderboards for Rogue. First of all, it's an extremely specialized build in order to meet the requirements of the Gauntlet. So for example, I am able to reach exactly 11k armor, which is the exact armor cap for level 124 monsters, which will be part of the Gauntlet. Any further investments into armor would be unnecessary, so for that reason I'm not playing with the Juggernaut aspect like many other rogues do, but we will cover more of that in the gear section later. Secondly, this build is extremely fast and mobile. We are playing with 3 agility skills with very low cooldowns, and we are also reaching the 200% movement speed cap most of the time, so we can just zoom through the map. And third, we deal massive AoE damage, and as you can see I'm able to basically one-shot every elite pack that I encounter. Please notice that in the gameplay shown I am not abusing the new weapon mastery bug, which would additionally increase our damage by the factor 3 to 5. We are also capped out with our attack speed if we use the snapshot bug, and nearly capped out if we do not. And lastly, we can also easily 1 or 2 shot bosses with a simple skill switch to rapid fire. Or if you are not the guy to do that, you can still kill most bosses in 3 to 4 Penshots. So no big need for any item switches or boss killing setups, and of course I will show you a showcase of that later in this video. Okay, now let's talk about the gameplay loop for a bit. Just to rewind the basic mechanics of the Penshot Rogue here. You usually want to attack with 3 to 4 punctures before shooting your Penshot arrow. This way you will stack all 3 combo points and 6 precision stacks most of the time. For elite packs I suggest you to always go with 4 punctures, while on trash mobs you can also go with 3. You also want to sometimes wait for a bit and pull together a large group of enemies before you start attacking. This way you ensure your Penshot to reach its most effectiveness, and also use Shadow Imbuement for both trash and elite enemies if possible. If you are playing with the Godslayer crown, which I can highly suggest for this build, you also need to keep in mind some details for this kind of rotation. So before attacking any elite pack, you first want to cast your Shadow Stab on one of it in order to get a stun and proc your Godslayer crown. This will also activate your T-Bolt's will buff, and then the entire screen will get pulled together and you can easily one-shot all enemies. The aiming can be a bit tricky in the beginning, but with some practice you should be fine. If you are a controller player though, this might be even more tricky, so you need to figure out for yourself if you want to utilize this play pattern or not. If not, you can just spam your Shadow Step to quickly move around the map, while if you will play with the Godslayer mechanic, you want to always keep at least 1 Shadow Step charge active for the next elite pack. Speaking about the other mobility skills, we want to use dash as often as possible to navigate more quickly through the map, especially in the empty passages of the dungeon. Concealment, on the other hand, has some further purposes. Since we are playing with the Silence aspect and Night Stalker glyph, we will reduce our Shadow Imbuement cooldown by 4 seconds every time we enter stealth mode with Concealment, while we also reduce our Concealment cooldown by 10 seconds after killing elite enemies. So our goal is to manage our skills in a way where we can constantly cast Concealment and Shadow Imbuement. Generally speaking, it is recommended to use Concealment at least 4 seconds before your Shadow Imbuement resets and every time before you are fighting an elite pack. In dungeons with dangerous monster types or affixes like snakes or cold enchanted, you should use it more conservatively though, so you can use Concealment as a CC break for annoying things like stuns and freezes. Although Diablo 4 is not a very skill-intense game, I consider this build to actually prove its players with some agency, to provide its players with some agency and room for improvement over time. You will get the most out of this build if you're able to master all of its cooldown interactions and especially adapt to the weekly dungeon layouts. So yeah, and as you can see, I'm clearing these dungeons in about 3 minutes, which is a very good timing, I think. And now I want to quickly show you some boss fights with this build. As far as we know, we will also need to kill bosses in the Gauntlet dungeon from time to time, so we also need to cover that. Like I mentioned in the beginning, bosses are not really a problem for this build, since we can easily switch back to rapid fire and basically one-shot most level 124 bosses in the game. If we are not allowed to switch skills or this playstyle is not appealing to you, I can also show you that it's possible to kill a boss within 3 to 4 Penshots as well. So it's not really a problem either way, either we switch to rapid fire or we just keep the playstyle with Penshot, it will be not a problem at all. And now, before we go over the gear, skills and Paragon, I want to discuss some further questions that some of you might have regarding this build. So the number one popular question might be if the Shako is better than the Godslayer crown. So in the gameplay I showed you my rogue speedrun with the Godslayer crown, so I was not wearing a Shako there, and I actually believe that Godslayer is a bit better in the Gauntlet scenario than the Shako. So we don't need the damage reduction from Shako anyways, and also damage is not really a problem since we are one-shotting all the elites with proper gear. But the big advantage of the Godslayer crown is that we have this huge pulling effect. So by pulling enemies together in a very small area, we can very easily and very fast kill and one-shot all the elites and trash mobs nearby. And this way we can more quickly move forward and just continue with our dungeon journey. So I think that the pulling effect from the Godslayer crown is a very important mechanic in Gauntlet dungeons to save you more time, and I valued this mechanic more than all of the advantages that the Shako provides to us. And again, we don't really need the defensive purposes of the Shako, so the extra life and the 20% damage reduction is not really important. And also the damage is not really important. The only thing that could be important with the Shako is the +4 ranks to all skills. So this means we are also decreasing the cooldown of something like Dash, which is one of the most important mobility skills for this build. So maybe in some situations the Shako will be better than the Godslayer crown, so we will need to test this further in the future. But for now I will start the Gauntlet with the Godslayer crown. Then the second question, what if the Gauntlet will have higher monster levels? So maybe the devs decide that monster level will not be level 124, but something like monster level 140, or who knows, maybe even higher. So can we do that? And also, can I farm something like Nightmare tier 90 plus with this build? So in the current setup, it is not recommended to play content that is higher as tier 70 to 75. So like I mentioned, this build is specialized around the Gauntlet event, and also our armor cap is yeah, just perfect for the Gauntlet event. But if you want to farm higher nightmare tiers like Nightmare 90, or also yeah, if the Gauntlet will have higher monster levels, then we can do one simple item switch. So we just need to swap our T-Bolt's Will with another legendary pants, and on this pants we will have another total armor affix, and this way we will further increase our armor value, and we then will be able to also farm higher tiers and also be prepared for higher monster levels in the Gauntlet. So yes, it is possible, but we need to do a gear swap there, and I will show you in the next section when we talk about all of the gear. Okay, so now let's actually talk about the gear. Today I don't want to go over every single affix and item, so instead I would like to focus on the most important things that you need to consider when rebuilding this build here. So as always, I will provide you my Mobalytics planner in the description and in the comment section, and there you can just check out the gear, like all the items by your own, and take your time. So I'd like to start with the discussion about resistances first. So as you can see here, I am fully capped out at all 5 resistances. And in order to achieve that, you need to strictly follow my guidance basically. So on my boots, you can see I have movement speed, and this pair of boots has triple res roll here. But actually I have some better boots here. So this one also have +4 ranks of dash, and you can see compared to the other boots, I would have 8.25 seconds cooldown, while with +4 ranks of dash on my boots, I have 7.25 seconds cooldown. So I'm already saving 1 second here, and this is very important for the Gauntlet events especially, because everything will be about the fastest speed actually. So I can highly recommend you finding boots with movement speed and +4 ranks of dash. And the last 2 spots are reserved for your resistances. And here it's important to focus on lightning, fire and cold resistance. So you do not want to put shadow and poison resistances on your gear, because we will cover these resistances later in our Paragon board. So this is very important. You just focus on lightning, cold and fire. So here I already have cold and lightning on my boots, meaning that I will need a chest plate with the last fire resistance. So here I have one with shadow resistance. This is not ideal. So like I mentioned, you do not want shadow resistance on your gear. So I still need to find a decent chest plate with fire resistance. And this way you can, like, you will be fully capped out on resistances with the setup here. So this is like the perfect setup, but I will talk in a minute about what you can do if you can't find the perfect chest plate or the perfect boots so quickly. But yeah, this is the perfect setup idea. And also maybe you already saw, like here I have skulls only in my jewelry. So we do not have the possibility to compensate some missing resistances with our jewelry here, because it is also very important to have this skulls inside. So why do we need skulls in our jewelry? Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, with this build we are specialized completely for this Gauntlet event, and for that reason we want to achieve exactly 11,000 armor. So here, for example, my boots have a little bit higher item power here, so you can see I'm reaching exactly 11,000 armor, and this is the exact armor cap for level 124 monsters, which will be part of the leaderboard dungeons. So for that reason, or in order to achieve this 11k armor cap, we need to put 3 skulls in our jewelry, and we need 2 decent total armor rolls on our chest plate and on our amulet. So this is also very crucial in order to achieve this 11k armor. And also in the Paragon board later we will invest into some nodes, which will also provide us with some armor. But ideally you want to have 2 decent rolls on your chest plate and your amulet. And on your amulet you also want movement speed. And cooldown reduction. So like I mentioned, in the Gauntlet event, everything is about speed. So you want to have very small cooldowns for your dash and your concealment and your shadow step. So cooldown reduction and movement speed, and also something like +3 ranks to agile skills, for example, is very good to have on your amulet as well. So yeah, total armor, movement speed, cooldown reduction. These three are very crucial. And on your chestplate, you want the missing resistance that you do not have on your boots. So in my case, fire resistance and total armor. And then 2 decent damage reduction rolls. So these are your perfect amulet, chestplate, and boots. And I would say that these 3 item slots are the most crucial ones for this build in order to achieve this armor cap and resistance cap. So with the boots here, I have the full resistance cap as well. So yeah, but now let's talk about some further options. So if you have a difficult time finding the perfect items in the beginning, you can also swap your Thibault's Will for another legendary pants. And also, like I was talking previously, if you also want to increase your armor in general, because you want to farm some higher keys, or maybe in the Gauntlet event the monster level will be slightly higher, then you can swap the Thibault's Will with some legendary pants. And you can see here my armor just increases from 11k to about 13k. So here we are getting pretty close to this armor cap value that you need for the tier 100 dungeons. So yeah, you just need a decent pair of rare pants here, sorry. And here you can put another total armor affix on your pants, and then you will increase your armor by a lot. And here you also can compensate for some resistance problems. So if you are not able to find some decent boots or chestplate with all of the resistances that you need, you can also put some resistances here. And theoretically, you could also replace your Godslayer crown with a decent helmet and also solve some of your resistance problems here. So I also always have some nice helmets here. But ideally you want to play with your Godslayer crown, so I would rather replace your Thibault's Will here. But yeah, this is the item swap that you can do to solve your problems with resistances and armor, and also, like mentioned, to farm some higher nightmare keys. And also, like I mentioned, you can play with a Shako if you have one, but yeah, I think Godslayer crown will be slightly better just because of this pulling effect like I described previously. But of course you can also play with a Shako if you have one and test this as well. And then another discussion about your weapon. So what is better, Crossbow or Skyhunter? So right now, as I mentioned, there's a bug with weapon mastery. So crossbows with weapon mastery deal 3 to 5 times more damage than usual. So it's pretty much OP. But even without a bug, the crossbows, yeah, pretty good. But then the damage would be very similar to Skyhunter. So in fact, I can show you, I have made a simple calculation in my Google Sheets here. So the crossbow is dealing only about 2% more damage in my specific setup here. So compared to Skyhunter, the crossbow deals slightly more damage, but it has the disadvantage of slower attack rate. So Skyhunter has this 1.1 attacks per second, while crossbows have 0.9 attacks per second. So without this bug, this weapon mastery bug that is currently in the game, I think I would switch to Skyhunter. But with the bug in the game, I'd stay with the crossbow for now. And the last thing I want to discuss here is I'm playing with this Icy Alchemist aspect here. And I know that many rogue players also like to play with this Icy Alchemist aspect. But I think they do it for the wrong reason, kinda. Because I also see many rogues put this aspect on the amulet in order to increase the damage dealt by this cold explosion. But I actually want to show you that this cold explosion damage is not really important. So I can show you the screenshot here where you see that compared to my penetrating shot damage, so here I'm dealing about 3 million with my Skyhunter and 1 penetrating shot, and in comparison we only deal 67,000 with this cold explosion from Icy Alchemist. So the damage is really not that important here. The reason why we want to play with Icy Alchemist instead is that we want to proc our Frigid Finesse passive. So here you can see with my amulet I have +6 ranks to Frigid Finesse, and this gives me 60% multiplicative damage bonus against frozen enemies. And also we have something like this control glyph in our Paragon board later, which also gives us 20% increased damage to frozen enemies. So together with the control glyph and the Frigid Finesse passive, we are dealing about 90% multiplicative damage, like 90% more multiplicative damage if we freeze our enemies with Icy Alchemist. So this is the main reason why we want to play with Icy Alchemist. And again, we do not care too much about this cold explosion damage at all, so there's no reason to put this aspect on your amulet or something. The damage is just not worth it. So yeah, just to get this clarified. And yeah, now let's talk about the skills. Okay, so we are playing with Fundamental Puncture as our basic skill. Then as you can see, I'm playing with Penetrating Shot and Rapid Fire at the same time. So like I mentioned, I would like to swap these skills during the boss fights. So here on my keyboard I simply press S, and then I can just pick up this Rapid Fire skill and drag and drop it into my skill bar, and now I have Rapid Fire equipped. So I think that this is a very simple and quick method to just increase your damage versus the bosses. But if you do not want to play with Rapid Fire but only with Penetrating Shot instead, you can just simply remove all of these skills here and invest them into something else. I can also show you later. And here I also switched from Advanced Penetrating Shot to Improved Penetrating Shot. So previously I was playing with Advanced for slowing enemies, but I just realized since I'm one-shotting everything, I just don't need to slow anything. And here at least I get this additional 10% critical strike chance bonus. So for my puncture, so I can more often proc my precision stacks after 3 punctures instead of 4. So that's the reason for that. Then here you want to take Methodical Shadow Step instead of Disciplined Shadow Step. This is very important because this way we proc our stun that we need to proc our Godslayer crown, like you saw in the beginning in the previous gameplay videos. And yeah, here you want to play with Weapon Mastery, since this is also currently bugged. So yeah, like I mentioned, crossbows deal much more damage if you have Weapon Mastery skilled. Then here you can see I invest as many skill points into dash as possible. So with my boots I would even have more, so 9 or 5. And I highly prioritize dash, also in comparison to something like Shadow Imbuement. So you can see here, Shadow Imbuement I only have 1 of 5 points, while I max out my dash. So the reason for that is I just want to keep my cooldown as low as possible, because I think the speed will be the #1 thing in the gauntlet. So you just want to move as quickly as possible through the map and cast your dash as often as possible. And Shadow Imbuement is very similar to Icy Alchemists, to the cold explosions. They do not deal too much of a damage. So I can also show you in a screenshot here. Like you can see, it's already opened, that here this Shadow Explosions also deal only about 50 to 100k. Of course it also can stack up, like if you hit multiple enemies with one single explosion. But nonetheless, it's not the greatest damage output. So it's just enough to clear all of these trash mobs. So this is the main purpose for Shadow Imbuement, to faster clear the entire screen. But 1 point is actually already enough to do that. And here I also only have 1 point into concealment. The reason for that is since we are playing with resistant to silence aspect, we are consistently and very often reducing our cooldown and basically resetting our cooldown of concealment. So every time we kill elite enemy, we reduce the cooldown here. So for me, I didn't feel like I need to invest any more points into concealment. I just had a very nice uptime already. But if you are not playing with rapid fire, then of course you could, for example, put in the points here and also some points into Shadow Imbuement if you like. But yes, since I will be playing with rapid fire as well, I only invest 1 point into concealment and 1 point into Shadow Imbuement. Then here we have 3 points in Frigid Finesse, and I have another 3 for my amulet, so 6 in total. And then as usual 3 points into haste for more movement speed, and the rest goes into Alchemist's Fortune, so I proc my Icy Alchemist aspect a little bit more consistent, and of course the Precision key passive. And now let's talk about the Paragon board. Actually, I forgot to mention the Seneschal companions, so let's do that first. So here I'm playing with a very classic combination. So we have Flash of Adrenaline with Tactical, Duration, and Genesis. If you do not have Genesis, you can simply replace this with Fortify. And here I'm playing with Tempest and Safeguard, Evernight, and Efficiency. So again, here if you don't have Evernight, you can replace this with something like Breaking Support. So the idea here is we do not want to take any damage skills for our companion, since it will be behind us all the time basically. So with the Rogue we are too fast for the companion, so we can't really rely too much on it. So instead we just want to get all of these nice buffs. So something like Safeguard will give us a constant damage reduction buff. Evernight will give us this +4 ranks to all skills, so this is like a free Shako. And instead Breaking Support will break barrier effects from enemies. This can also be helpful from time to time. And Efficiency will give us more critical strike chance. This is especially helpful versus in boss fights. So we can even more quickly stack up our precision stacks. So this is the idea here. But yeah, like I mentioned, I would not rely too much on the companion, and this is just like a simple bonus here. So yeah, just so you know. And now let's talk about the Paragon board. I'm very proud of this Paragon board as usual. I think it's a very good Paragon board. And let's start with the starting board here. So we play with Exploit Glyph because we want to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. And here, if you're wondering why I'm not taking this skillful rare note here, 20% damage is an additive damage bonus. So this transfers into about 2% damage increase in total. So that's why it's not really important to take this note here. And we have more important notes or points to spend. But we want this armor note here because we just need to reach our 11k armor cap. Then the second board is this Tricks of the Trade board. Here we play with Devious. This is also especially helpful in boss fights because with Puncture we can slow enemies. So after casting 4 punctures we already gain 8% damage bonus increase from this Devious Glyph. And yeah, it just helps us to one-shot bosses even more consistently. And here we also get this armor bonus and damage to elite bonus. And especially the armor bonus again is something that we are very looking for to reach our armor cap. Then we take this Havoc note for critical strike damage for our precision passive. And here I really like this Ranger node for damage reduction from distant enemies. I consider damage reduction from distant enemies to be the most important one for the Rogue class. And here you can finally see, so I was talking about in the gear section, that we will cover our shadow and poison resistances later in the Paragon board. So here we take this shadow resilience node and we get up to 35% additional shadow resistance. And also in the next board we will take this poison resilience node and get 35% poison resistances. And this way we can basically cap out at all resistances here. So yeah, that's the reason for that. So yeah, the third board is No Witness. Here we have another classic combination of efficacy glyph in this board here. So we have a very efficient intelligence node pathing, and it activates this bonus to maximum life and damage. So here we have 18% maximum life bonus, which is very huge on Rogue and very nice to have. And yeah, here also we take this Ruin node for additional damage to healthy enemies and critical strike damage. Then the fourth board is Layrena's Instinct. So like I mentioned, poison resilience for poison resistance. And then another classic combination here, we max out the combat glyph here. So we have 49 intelligence nodes, and this gives us nearly 200% critical strike damage, which is very good to scale our critical strike damage and our precision passive, which is scaling damage with critical strike. So that's for that reason. And here we also take this resistance to all elements node. Then the next board is Cheap Shot. We do not proc Cheap Shot too often, but again with puncture we can slow enemies. So after 3 punctures, let's say we sometimes slow 2 or 3 enemies and gain this 15% damage bonus from time to time. Then we take this safeguard here for additional damage reduction. And here again a very efficient intelligence glyph pathing. So we take Night Stalker glyph, and yeah, this is the glyph that reduces our shadow imbuement cooldown 4 seconds after using concealment. And here we also take the Spearhead rare node for damage to healthy enemies, but especially because we want additional 200 armor from this nodes here. And the last board is Eldritch Bounty. So here we take this control glyph first, and then we go all the way down to this legendary node for additional 20% damage when we use shadow imbuement. So yeah, this is the Paragon board. I really like it. I think it's the perfect Paragon board for the setup. And if you have some, if you have the perfect gear, for example, with maxed out item level and so on, then you will even have something like 11.5k armor. And in this case, you could, for example, remove some of the single armor nodes here and just put them in something else, like maximum life or critical strike damage. So, but these are very small details, and generally speaking, this Paragon board is already optimized for every rogue build, so you can reach your armor cap and your resistance cap. Okay, so I think that's it. I hope that you learned something and you enjoyed this content here. If you do, I would really appreciate if you would leave me a like or subscribe to my channel. So yeah, this is the build that I will run in the Gauntlet event, and I will try to push for this top 1000 leaderboards. And I think this build is very promising and one of the best, if not the best rogue build for the Gauntlet. So yeah, I hope you learned something, and I guess I see you in the Gauntlet, guys. Have a nice day and bye bye.